you all so much for this donation and your support. You know, we really wouldn't exist if it weren't for the Roswell Rotary Club. A lot of our founding members were members of this club, including Dr. Malone Dodson. And I think the Roswell Rotary was also one of our very first financial supporters. So it's amazing that it was in 1992, 20 years ago, that a group of concerned citizens got together to form our organization, and that now you've continued to support us. So we really appreciate it. And you know, hopefully 20 years from now, we won't be here accepting a check because there won't be a need. You know, hopefully we will have a decent home for all of those that need it. But in the meantime, we really appreciate everything you've done for us.
Thanks for all you're doing. Just looking forward to working. We're just looking forward to get out there and swing our hammers and do whatever we can to help. Great, thanks.
Thank you, President Dave. Well, if you've opened up a newspaper this week, or if you've looked on the internet, you've seen the big banners. President's Day, followed by the word sale. Unfortunately, one of our days to honor President has been reduced down to improving retail sales, which I'm all for, by the way. And actually, President's Day isn't really to honor presidents in general. It's really just an extension of George Washington's birthday, but it got contorted somewhere and confused, and we lost a little something in the translation. And unfortunately, we probably lost a little bit of history in some of the translations at all. We have a guest with us today that's going to give you a particularly great and local perspective, as this particular president has a very close tie here to Roswell, Georgia, as his mother was none other than Mittie Bullock. Born in New York City on October 27, 1858, graduated Phi Beta Kappa and magna cum laude from Harvard University. He was elected the youngest member of the New York General Assembly. In the years to follow, he became a cattle rancher in the Dakota Territory and ran successfully for the mayor of New York City. He served as a United States Civil Service Commissioner, President of the Police Commission of New York City, Assistant Secretary of the United States Navy, Colonel in the 1st United States Volunteer Cavalry, Governor of New York, Vice President, and President of the United States, all by the age of 42. Kind of makes us wonder about our own accomplishments, doesn't it? As president, he was responsible for building the Panama Canal, for establishing 230 million acres of parks, national forests, wildlife refuges, and national monuments. He helped build the modern Navy, delivered a square deal, and battled against trust and land robbers. He was the father of 6 children, if you can imagine that in the White House, and the author of over 30 books, a big game hunter, a leading ornithologist, and the founder of Boone and Crockett, the nation's first fair hunting and conservation organization. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you the 26th President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt.
Thank you. And I'm reminded now, we didn't have microphones in my day. It helps if you turn it on, surely. Hello, Rotarians. Bully for you. Mr. Weaver, President McCleary, ladies and gentlemen, I am Theodore Roosevelt, and I'm delighted to be with you and bully for Roswell Rotary. Hear, hear. Well, I came to the Atlanta region yesterday to visit with some of the young school children, and I was at Chamblee Charter High School, and while visiting Chamblee Charter High School, the children there were wonderful. They greeted me and recognized me. They said, "Hello, Colonel. Good morning, Teddy." And if I may, we're going to go back the old-fashioned way, gentlemen. I am Theodore Roosevelt, and I don't need a microphone. We're going to wing this one this way, gentlemen. I'll come amongst you. You'll be able to hear me, I'm sure. So the children at Chamblee, they recognized me. They said, "Hello, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Colonel." And those greetings stood in such stark contrast to my recent visit to Theodore Roosevelt High School in Los Angeles, California. They are there, the Rough Riders. My picture and quotations adorn the hallways. But when I arrived, one young man saw me, pointed at me and told his friends, "Look, there's the Monopoly dude." I was greatly disappointed. If they truly knew their history, they would have known I was the anti-Monopoly dude. But you may well ask President Roosevelt, why are you back with us? 150 years or more after your birth, a century after your historic presidency, and some of you know, some 90 years after my corporal demise. Well, there is a pernicious rumor afoot. There is no truth in it. I have not come back to life because former Vice President Cheney needs a hunting lesson. Yeah. No, indeed. Though I wouldn't mind moose hunting with the former governor of Alaska, Mrs. Palin. I think that would be fully fun. So I am here to celebrate all that is good and great in America, and to hopefully inspire some of our young people to the great challenges ahead. This is a wonderful country. It has not come to us at no expense. There has been great sacrifice. So if there is anything today that you enjoy, or from which you take some small inspiration, may I say that my brief remarks today are dedicated to the men and women of the United States Armed Forces. Hear, hear. Any of you who has asthma or has asthma in your family knows what a terrible thing it is to see a small child choking for breath and life itself. My father, Theodore Roosevelt, the greatest man I ever knew, got me breath and got me life by some nights holding me aloft through the night. Some nights we'd have the horses tied to the carriage, and me bumping the blankets in the back of the carriage would speed through the streets of New York, rushing air to my young lungs. And physicians today tell me, rather than the speed of the conveyance of the carriage ride, it's the excitement, which produces adrenaline naturally in my bloodstream, and that assisted my breathing. Today, the young asthmatic has the inhaler to restore breath. We had no such medicine in my day, and in my day, the treatment for asthma was worse than the cure. Can you imagine giving a small asthmatic boy a cigar to smoke? The idea was that coffee would stimulate my breathing. I was given bitter black coffee to drink, again as a stimulant, and I was given ipecac syrup. Now, the children do not know ipecac syrup. Your parents' generation knows it. I share with the children that ipecac syrup is something that you drink in order to see your lunch. Twice. Very unpleasant stuff. My father, still greatly concerned about my lack of vigor, called me into his study when I was a boy about 11. And he said, "Theodore, you have the mind, but you have not the body. And without the body, the mind cannot go as far as it otherwise might. It is hard work and drudgery, but you must make your body." I said, "Father, I can." And I set out to make my body with calisthenics. I lifted weights, swam, I rowed, I worked on the parallel bars and the rings. I even took boxing lessons in the classical manner. And I built my body. And it does appear I may have overdone it just a bit. But when I was your president at 5'8" and 220 solid pounds, I was but a mere feather of a man. Compared to my successor, William Howard Taft, at times Taft tipped the scales at over 350 pounds. When I was the president and Taft our governor in the Philippines, we had word that Taft was in ill health and fever, perhaps near death. My Secretary of State, John Hayes, came to the Philippines, inquired as to Taft's health. And Taft came back, health fine. Rode horse 20 miles this morning. They came back, house a horse. We acknowledge this year the centennial of the 1912 presidential campaign, when I first, returning from my home in Somalia and Africa, in my great tour of Europe, during which I accepted the Nobel Peace Prize given to us, the American people, with help to settle the Russo-Japanese War. When I returned to the United States, I saw that President Taft had broken several personal promises to me, fired my National Forester Gifford Pinchot, and returned my Republican Party and the government back over to the men that I called malefactors of great wealth and land robbers. Well, I told the press in early 1912 that I was stripped to the waist, healthy as a bull moose, and that my hat was in the ring. The first time that pugilistic phrase had been used in the political lexicon. I can't campaigned for the Republican nomination. I defeated Taft in 9 of the 12 Republican primaries, defeating him in his home state of Ohio. Senator McFarland from Wisconsin won 2 of the other primaries, but at the Republican convention in Chicago, the Republican nomination was stolen for Taft. By the way, not the first nor the last time that something politically has been stolen in Chicago. Roosevelt delegates rose as one and marched out, shouting, "Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not steal," and assembled in Chicago weeks later as the Progressive Party convention. Now, some say that the golden rule of the 10 Commandments were our platform. "Onward, Christian soldier" was our theme song. My nomination was seconded by Jane Addams. She, the great social reformer of Chicago's whole house, for unlike the other 2 major parties, women's suffrage was a part of our forward-looking platform. And I accepted the nomination. I told the audience there, we stand at Armageddon and we battle for the Lord. And the party took its nickname from that statement I earlier made to the press. We were known as the Bull Moose Party. During that campaign, I toured the country. Governor Wilson carried the Democratic standard from New Jersey. President Taft was the incumbent Republican candidate, and he was so unpopular he could not run a traditional Rose Garden campaign. He had to travel the country. And before a friendly Republican audience in New York City, he was introduced by the Republican senator and wit, Chauncey Depew. And Senator Depew had some fun at the president's expense, for he told the audience that President Taft was a man pregnant with virtue. He told the audience that President Taft was pregnant with integrity. When President Taft took the roster, he had his due in rejoinder. He told the audience indeed, if he gave birth to a son, he would name him virtue. If he gave birth to a daughter, he would name her integrity. If, however, it was simply gas, he would call it Chauncey Depew. It always helps to speak last of those things. Well, again, a wonder that I became your president, but when we ask the question, how I became your president, I think many historians will point first here, to Roswell, Georgia. For while I am the only president born in New York City, New York, I stand before you half Georgian. And when I was born in 1858, on the eve of that great struggle, imagine what it was like in the Roosevelt household at 28 East 20th Street, nearby to Travis Park in Lower Manhattan. My father, pro-union, anti-slavery. My mother, pro-Confederacy and pro-slavery. And she, for decades after the war, remained entirely unreconstructed. Now, living with us in that household were my grandmother Bullock and my Aunt Anna Bullock, 3 Southern women beneath the roof. My father saw no way that he could take up arms and fight against his wife's family. He found another way to serve. He had the idea with others and went to Congress and lobbied successfully for the creation of an allotment commission. And he, during the years of the war, as an allotment commissioner, traveled the north, the south, and the west, wherever there were troops from New York, he signed them up to send a portion of their pay home for the support of spouse and children. And when my father was away, our kitchen in Manhattan became a bevy of pro-Confederate activity. For my grandmother, my aunt, and my mother would have us children in the kitchen, preparing packages of bandages and medicine and money that would make its way to the wharf and eventually, by blockade runner, bring aid to family and friends in Georgia. I can only share with you there was great relief in the Roosevelt household when that terrible war came to its conclusion. I did not attend a fine school like Roswell High School or Shamrock Charter. I was homeschooled, and in the parlance of today, I was indeed Christian homeschooled. For each and every day, our first lesson began when I would stand with my brother and 2 sisters at the foot of the stairs waiting to see my father dressed for the office, ready to go to work. And when we saw him so attired coming from his bedroom, we raced to the family sofa and called dibs on that portion of the sofa between my father and the arm of the sofa that we called the bunny hole. And there our day began with Bible devotion. And then my father off to work, I had my lessons from my Aunt Anna. And I was good at some subjects, like natural science and literature, and very poor at other subjects, like Greek and Latin and mathematics. But perhaps the most important lessons taught to me by my Aunt Anna were the lessons of my own Georgian heritage, of my great-great-grandfather, Archibald Bullock, a revolutionary Georgia, he being suspected of being poisoned by the British at his early demise in 1777 during the defense of Savannah. I was told stories of my forebears that marched off to Florida to fight in the Seminole War, of others who hunted the panther in the swamp, and others yet who crossed the Savannah River to fight fools of honor to the death across the state line in South Carolina, where dueling was not illegal. Some historians say, if not for this infusion of stories of Southern daring and duo, that I might never have been president, that I might have just grown up to be another boring Dutch Reform businessman living in Manhattan, New York, as 5 generations of Roosevelts had done before. And I cannot deny the theory. I was inspired greatly by the stories of the sons of Georgia, no less so by the stories of my uncles, Jimmy and Irvine Bullock. During the Civil War, Uncle Jimmy Bullock built half the Confederate Navy in Liverpool, England, including the great raider, the CSS Alabama. And it is said that my Uncle Irvine Bullock fired the last cannon off the Alabama in his fateful fight with the Kearsarge off the coast of France. What great inspiration I had from my Bullock roots. And I visited here during my presidency in 1905. I enjoyed that visit greatly in the downtown Oval Square. And may I just say, I'm long overdue for another visit, and I like what you've done with the place. I salute Rotary for your support of Bullock Hall, for Pam Billingsley and her staff who helped to keep the history of Bullock Hall alive. You have a jewel in Pam Billingsley and a jewel in Bullock Hall. And I salute one and all for the work that you do in assisting that great institution. And 1905 was not only the year I visited Roswell, it was the year that Paul Harris and his colleagues founded an organization called Rotary, for the fact that they rotated their meetings there in Chicago from one member's office to another. And you may know that the first service project of the Chicago Rotary Club was to purchase a horse for an itinerant preacher whose horse had passed away. The second public service project of the Chicago Rotary Club was to build the first public toilets in Chicago. And Rotarians have been providing relief to the people of Well, I do speak with the children about overcoming hardship. I share with them the story of my building my body and building my health through what I call the strenuous life. But I share with them as well a story of tragedy about which I never really spoke during my lifetime, because in my lifetime I thought that instead of keeping sad things alive by looking at them and examining them, it was best to put them away and put them behind you. But there was a day when I was a young politician, a young man of 25, serving my third one-year term in the New York General Assembly. I was known as the Cyclone Assemblyman. The cartoonists had a great deal of fun drawing my glasses, my mustache, and my teeth, and showing me standing on chairs, making speeches about righteousness and justice. Well, happy the day was when I received a telegram stating that my wife, Alice, was the mother of a healthy baby girl. Congratulations were all in all. I planned to return to the city quickly, but then quickly a second telegram came, and ominously so. And it sent me for the train. On the train down the Hudson Valley, racing to my home in the middle of the night, my brother Elliot answered the door with these words. He said, "There is a curse upon this house. Mother is dying, and your wife is too." On February 14th, St. Valentine's Day, 1884, in the morning, my dear widowed mother, Martha Mitty Bullock Roosevelt, the Rose of Roswell, she died a young woman of typhoid fever. That afternoon, beneath the same roof, in my arms, my dear sweet bride Alice, she but 22 and a new mother. She died of Bright's disease, a kidney disease not quite treatable by modern medicine. And there is nothing in my diary but a large black X. I wrote that the light had gone out of my life. A friend wrote of the twin funeral 2 days later, "Theodore knows neither what he does nor says." But I was a man of faith, and my faith told me my loved ones were not gone but gone before. And I took courage from the words of my late father. who said dark care seldom sits behind a rider whose pace is swift enough. Get action. Action I got. I had a lady named Alice for her late mother, cared for by my sister Patty. I returned to my work in Albany, threw myself into that work, saw the family affairs, took the train west, and got off that Northern Pacific train in the Dakota Territory, where the previous fall, in the after excitement of a successful bison hunt, I'd written a check for $20,000 to purchase cattle and to hire men to be my cattle ranch foreman. I was now a cattle rancher. If you think those rough and tumble men of Albany, New York thought me a strange dude, imagine how those cowboys and ranchers regarded me getting off that train. Why, I had silver cowboy spurs, a silver cowboy belt buckle, and a silver hunting knife, all jeweled at Tiffany's. I had glasses, which were some sort of a sign of a moral defect in a man's character. They called me storm windows and floor eyes. Well, I was not of their kind. I actually carried and read books, and had and used a toothbrush. But I worked alongside the men with him, saddle, silver tie, 16 or 18 hours a day, driving cattle, the most monotonous of paces. Then to be greeted by the excitement of running a herd across rivers, crimson ice with the South Stampede. I would have never been president but for my time in the Dakotas. And the sadness healed. There's nothing so good for the inside of a man or a woman as the outside of a horse. Strenuous living indeed. Now, fast forwarding through life, I remarried. Mrs. Roosevelt and I had 5 children together. We took Alice back into our care, breaking my sister Patty's heart, but then you realize we did rear 6 children at the White House. Mrs. Roosevelt claimed she reared 7 children there, that I was her most terrible child. Well, I boxed in the White House with Army officers. I was blind in my left eye in one boxing match, and Mrs. Roosevelt and I never told a soul who wanted to embarrass in the house, perhaps harming his career. I wrestled jiu-jitsu and sumo with great bare-chested men brought over by the Japanese ambassador, and I played single stick. Have you ever played single stick, sir? It's a delightful game where men beat each other about the head with a giant Q-tip. Great bully fun. But the game that I enjoyed most was a game that we called Point to Point, a hiking game that we'd invented with the Roosevelt children at Oyster Bay, Long Island, where my beloved home, Sagamore Hill, is still a National Historic Site. And the way you played point to point, at least we did in Oyster Bay, was first to spin a small Roosevelt child around point A. Wherever that child came to rest and pointed, beyond the horizon was some imaginary point B, towards which we raced in single file, the rule being that whenever you come to an obstacle, a down tree, a creek, a cliff, a barn, a haystack, you never go around the obstacle, but always over it, under it, or through it. Oh, it makes for great dirty fun. Well, I imported this game to Washington, D.C., and played this game with members of Congress and diplomats, and Army and Navy officers who showed themselves entirely too unfit physically to keep up with a fat old president running through the woods. Famous was the time when the French ambassador, Jean-Jules Jusserand, came to the White House for a point-to-point, and he had obviously disregarded the part of the invitation that said, "Wear your dirty clothes." For he arrived wearing the finest French silks in the French court. Off we rode our horses to Rock Creek Park, dismounted, raced through the woods, came to the Potomac River. The French ambassador looked greatly relieved. He had sweat through his clothes, and this being a very wide, deep, and fast-running portion of the river, he thought certainly this was our terminus. We would return to the White House for some well-earned refreshments. But I turned to the gentleman with me, and I said, "Gentlemen, let us take off our clothes. Put the bundles atop our heads, swim across the river, put our clothes back on dry, and continue our hike on the cliffs opposite." Well, I was the president, so we all did so. Can you imagine such a thing today? I think CNN would go live from a helicopter. As I entered the water, I saw that the French ambassador, while he had disrobed, he had kept on his kid gloves. I said, "Mr. Ambassador, why have you kept on your gloves?" He said, "Mr. President, that's in case we meet any ladies." I see that the domestic love industry is gone in the tank. All fashions have changed. We are much fierce and attaching people, are we not? My, how the bathing suit has shrunk over the years. Well, I share with you that these stories of overcoming tragedy, of building my body, even of overcoming political defeat. When I was a young man, I ran for the mayorship of New York. I came in 3rd. Out of 3. That's last place. But what if I'd given up on politics and public service after such a humiliating defeat in my hometown? What if I had given up on life itself? myself after that terrible, tragic blow as a young man. Persistence is as persistence does. Doggedness wins the prize. When life knocks one down, the great joy in living is getting back into the arena, getting back into the fight. Perhaps by this generation that I speak to often today, I am less known for a legacy of successes of the Panama Canal, of the national parks and forests, of the sailing of the Great White Fleet. Perhaps I am less known for the legacy of a failure in Onward, Mississippi in 1903, called thither to settle a boundary dispute between Louisiana and Mississippi for the fact that the changing course of the Mississippi created islands and pieces of land over which jurisdiction might be argued. Well, my hosts, being good Southern men, decided that they should have a great picnic in the Mississippi Delta and a bear hunt. Well, any of you who are sportsmen will understand that you can either have a great picnic or a great hunt. You cannot have them both at the same time in the same place. We scared every bear out of the Delta during those 3 days. But on the third night, the famous hunting guide, Hope Collier, came into camp and said, "Mr. President, I shall have you a bear by morning if I need to bring it into camp on the end of a rope." And we all laughed. But the next morning, men were yelling, dogs were barking. I raced out from my tent, and there Mr. Collier had tethered an old wounded bear to a tree. The bear was greatly wounded on its chest. Hunting dogs had attacked the bear killed 2 of the hunting dogs. Mr. Collier, wanting to save his prize dogs, but fearing to fire his rifle, went into the shallow water in which the bear and the dogs were wrestling, and he broke the barrel of his gun across the bear's head. Now the bear was bleeding from a great gash and wound on its head, and while that bear was so dazed by the blow, Mr. Collier tied one end of his lariat around the bear's neck, swam and tied the other end to a tree. And this horrific scene is the scene upon which I came rushing from my tent. My horror compounded when one in my hunting party said, "Mr. President, there's your bear. Go ahead and shoot your bear." Why, what a cowardly thing it would have been to do. I refused to shoot that bear. And when the cartoonist, the barbarian, heard that story, he drew a cartoon called "Drawing the Line in Mississippi," showing me refusing to shoot a small bear cub tied up. That was published in the Washington Post and nationwide, and when I returned to the White House, I received a letter from the Mitchum family. They mentioned me the idea of boycotting in New York City, New York, asking to make a stuffed bear and to name it after me. I wrote back, I said, "You may go ahead and do so, but I don't think it will help your sales very much at all." Well, I wonder, President Cleary, if you and others here have ever known the love and comfort of what then was called Teddy's bear. Now, I understand that Mr. Bob Hayes, a man who has chaired the annual Magnolia Ball and who has done wonderful work in the name of conservation at the Chattahoochee Recreation Area, well, I'd like to salute the work that Mr. Hagan has done. Now, he's going to visit the Queen. I guess the Queen takes precedence over a president. But I understand that this gentleman here will come and accept from Mr. Hagan this teddy bear from Roswell's one of her favorite sons, Teddy Roosevelt. Sir, thank you so much. Now, I've done what many a politician will do. I've gone over just a minute. But will I assure you that I will be back in Roswell? I've toured the 50 states, and, if you would, I'm not really Teddy Roosevelt. But I've been to all 50 states. My name is Joe Wiegand. I live in Sewanee, Tennessee. Thank God, 25 years ago, the University of the South had an affirmative action program for Yankees. And Roswell, Georgia, and Bullock Hall. You cannot tell the story of who Theodore Roosevelt is and what he did with his life unless you know the story of the Bullock family. It's an honor and a blessing as a fellow Rotarian to be with you today. If any of you would like to visit afterwards about bringing Teddy Roosevelt to life in Roswell, it would be a blessing for me. This is a place that I'd really love to salute Roswell and the Bullock family. God bless you, keep you all, and thanks for what you do in Roswell.
Thank you, Teddy. Your time is running to the perfect, but you're planting 2,500 trees, and all the ones planted at Bullock Hall will be in your honor.